Okay, this next part that was requested, I give some ideas on how you might start this. Came from Bryan. It's a violin part, and this is interesting because this isn't square, these are not square, and overall it looks like it might be somewhat of a challenge. So let's see what I can do here. Alright, just going to put that here so I can have a reference while I'm modeling this. I'm going to go to start a new sketch, and even though nothing is square, I think I still would start with what is the tallest it can be, what is the widest it can be, and make a box for that. Alright, I would go back and make this whole box a construction line, because I'm not actually going to use that for any of the modeling. I'm just going to use that for knowing where my limits are. Okay, next step is I want to see where this corner is. So I'd measure from the base, if you set it up on the table, and measure the distance up through dial caliper up to that line. And that should be at some set height. And again, as with the last video, I do not have this part in front of me, so I do not have exact dimensions. Ignore what these numbers are, but just know that when you're measuring, you can set these up as construction lines and kind of go from that point. Alright, I know I want a 3-point arc, so I make a point. Ooh, and it doesn't like construction lines apparently. I'm making a 3-point arc. I want to constrain to these two intersections. And maybe the intersections are what's throwing it off, since they're construction lines. I'm going to try and cut off my two ends there. Okay, looks like that was constrained correctly. And that one is as well. Okay, perfect. So I'm using those two endpoints to kind of snap this arc to those. I also want to see how far in this would be. And a good way to do that, if you can almost see here, if I stood this up on edge and I put it up against a flat surface, I want to measure the distance from this flat surface to where this is with my caliper. So how far is that away? Whatever that distance might be, let's turn that into a construction line. We'll do the same thing on each side. Okay, so those are both now construction. I'm going to trim because I had issues when I didn't trim before. Go to dimension. We'll put in the one side first. Let's assume that's correct. When I go to put in the other side, I can just click on this. Sometimes I can just click on this as a reference, and now these two will be linked. So if I change this to 0.05, they'll both change to 0.05. Okay, so let's say that that was correct. I then grab my line tool, go from this point down to that intersection on either side. You want to measure, and here again, maybe I can kind of show it. No, maybe not. Nope, never mind. Imagine, ooh, I have two of them. This does help. Imagine if you put something underneath this. Okay, so this is on a flat surface. I measure from this line up to this point. And actually it doesn't look like it's very much, so I'm going to make it small on this drawing. And again, this is something that you would be measuring with your calipers. You're marking the distance away. You're using this line now as a reference on how far up and over this should go. You should also be able to measure from this edge to here. Again, if you had a flat surface, you could use that as a step distance. So let's assume again that you can find that. Do that on either side, just so we have a vertical line. Distance between there, looks like it goes in quite a bit. We'll make this go in 1/4 inch. Again, I don't have the actual part. Don't use my same dimensions. Just look at what I'm doing, the method I'm using for this. Okay, after we know this, we can go back with our line tool, connect that intersection up to this one. The same thing on the other side. Does look like that goes straight up. There's some kind of little circle over here somewhere. This is the kind of thing where if you can measure the distance between there, that'd give you a diameter. And if you measure the distance like between this face and I don't know if there's really something nice over here you can measure to. If you use step distance again, you can measure from this wall to where this is. So a lot of what you're going to be doing is just finding references on where you can put things. I don't even know if that circle made it on the line. Yeah, it looks like it did. Uh-oh. Here it did not. So here I want my circle to pass through this line. I can say coincident with the center point in this line, and now it drops down to it. Can make this into a construction line. And now I can start to draw another line that has to be tangent with this circle. Ideally, it would tell me when it's tangent. If it doesn't, don't sweat it. Just make it go out a little bit further. Make the two tangent. Trim off the extra. Okay, so there's that little rounded part, like what you see here. You'll end up, if you don't use mirror, you'll end up drawing a lot of things on both sides so it ends up symmetrical. These, to me, they kind of look like an ellipse. So you'd have to know with an ellipse, anytime you draw an ellipse, is the distance out and the distance up. So, assuming we knew these, and had an idea of where this was, it also looks like it's rotated. So I should be able to say rotate this shape, center point is there. And it's at a little bit of an angle. And you can type in here where it says angle exactly what that would be. If it's a 30 or 20 or 15. Okay. And with this, it might be hard to say where the center is, but you can figure out. This is something I do a lot. If we draw a line, make this into a construction line, have this be tangent to the line, so now it has to touch at just the one point, and now you can measure how far this is from this line. Okay, so instead of 0.085, maybe I want it to be 0.1. And nudge it over. I can do the same kind of thing, measuring from the bottom up or from the top down to make another line that's tangent. And that doesn't look horizontal to me, so I'm going to make sure with my horizontal constraint that it's straight. Tangent that line to that circle, and then I can set how far up it is. Okay. Quickly, I was also sent this picture. Looks like, aside from it being a funny shape this way, it's also at a wedge kind of an angle. So let's assume that I can make this basic shape. Basic, right? Here's another tool that sometimes works. Sometimes it gives issues. We can mirror different parts. Let's say I want to mirror these two features across this line. That worked. I want to make an arc. Oh, I don't want it to snap to. Let me try that one more time. I want my arc to be tangent to these. This is another one where if you knew how high up it was going to go, you could set a construction line, make it tangent to that line. I'll go ahead and draw that in here. That way you have an idea of what I'm doing. I think by this point you've kind of figured out what my method is. If not, you should have been paying closer attention. Trim the pieces you're not going to use. See if there's a little trace of that on the other side. Nope. Okay. And something I want to check with this is that the center point from this arc matches up with the center point of the rest of the thing. And the same should be true of that. Okay, so let's say I can go ahead and finish this and extrude it out. I want this to be a little bit thicker, not 1 inch thick, but let's say I want 0.25. Even that seems big. Okay, I want to make it the thickest part possible. Go in to start a 2D sketch. I'm going to make the sketch on one of these original planes, like my YZ plane. And from here, looks like that's a 90-degree angle, and this is the part that's tapered. So I want to figure out what this small part is. I'd end up making a line. Right click, you can F7 and see what the inside of this whole thing looks like, which apparently is not very good. But if I know how small this part is, and I already set this top part to be the correct distance, then when I go to connect my two lines here, I can do an extrude, cut to remove material, change my distance to all. Now it's cutting all the way across.